You're happy because he's gone from Michigan. Yes. What's a realistic like if they don't make the playoffs, is this a disappointment?
Yeah, I think it's a playoff team. Like, I think this is a playoff. I think they have a playoff roster despite losing Mike Williams, despite losing Keenan Allen. I think it's set up in a way where he can win quickly. And I would expect that they're going to be an 8, 9, 10 win team. And I think Jim expects that of himself and of his team, where they're going to be able to create a real identity. And to me, what's so unique about Jim Harbaugh, J-Mac, is that there are very few coaches who have such an identifiable look to their team that travels with them wherever they go. And it looks exactly the same, and you know it when you see it. And what it looked like at Stanford is what it looked like at San Francisco, is what it looked like at Michigan. I expect that's what it's going to look like at the Chargers. I think it's going to be a team that's going to be very physical, that's built through the lines of scrimmage. You see the emphasis there with them deciding to take Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors with the 5th overall pick, despite having, a need at that receiver position and waiting until the second round to go and get a receiver. They got Ladd McConkey. And I think by creating that sort of identity, they're going to make things easier on Justin Herbert. And I think by asking less of Justin Herbert, they're going to wind up getting more out of him. That's what Jim's always done with his quarterbacks. So, I think the offense is going to be more physical, better at running the ball. And I think you're going to get a better version of Justin Herbert as a result of that. And, again, you can see kind of the emphasis in what they're doing, right? And they had the 4 guys with big contracts: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Joey Bosa, and Khalil Mack. Who'd they hang on to? They hung on to Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa and let Mike Williams and Keenan Allen go. That, again, shows an emphasis on the lines of scrimmage, and that should help them get it done with Jesse Minter's defense on the other side of the ball. So I think this team's going to be a bitch to play against because they play differently than a lot of teams in today's NFL. And I think it's going to be a team that's going to be right there in the playoff hunt. From a roster standpoint, they may not be ready to compete for a championship, but I think that they very much can be in the playoff hunt year one under Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, well, Albert Breer, by the way, congrats on your Buckeyes on the national championship that they're going to win this year. I saw an article where they're going to have like 15 guys drafted in the first round, second round. So congrats on your Buckeyes.
We look like we're ready to go, man. I think 8, 9 guys who might have been top 100 picks that came back to school. I've never seen that before at Ohio State.
And maybe you'll lose Ryan Day.
The quarterback thing squared away. Yeah. Will Howard delivers. I think we got a good chance to be right there in Atlanta in the middle of January, looking to win another national title.
I'm sure you'll be there front row or suite, press spot, wherever it is. All right, Albert Breer, great stuff. Happy holiday. Reportedly fed up with Jerry Jones, who said they were going to go all in, but they haven't done jack squat to improve the roster. McCarthy probably wants a deal. What are you hearing, Albert?
Well, I look at this on 2 levels, right? Like the first level is the team level, and they've got a lot going on right now. With the Dak situation, with the Justin Jefferson or the CeeDee Lamb situation, the Micah Parsons situation. Justin Jefferson's deal hits them on 2 of those fronts because it's going to affect the Parsons negotiation. It's going to affect the Lamb negotiation. And then, you got the Dak Prescott thing, which, now you're looking at going into a contract year with your quarterback, and you really don't have the franchise tag available to him because he would cost over $80 million to tag in 2025. So you've got all those loose ends. And now, of course, you've got your coach and most of his staff too, heading into a year where their contracts are going to be up. And so on the team level, there's just a lot happening there. Individually, for Mike McCarthy, it's hard to blame him, J-Mac. He's won 12 games 3 years in a row. But this is sort of a product of the noise that he had to deal with at the end of last year in November and December. When you asked around to people who know these things and who run in these circles, what you kept hearing was just a playoff berth won't save Mike McCarthy. He's got to get in and he's got to look good in the playoffs. That didn't happen, of course. They looked bad in losing to the Packers. And so, they wind up holding on to him, but that was after a few days of deliberations. And so, certainly, on one hand, you got somebody who is, dealing with a team that's got a lot of loose ends, that's got a lot of high expectations, that may be reaching the end of a window for a certain group of players. And then on the other end, you have a coach who is sitting here having won 12 games 3 years in a row, who's got a Super Bowl champion pedigree, who's now won with 2 different franchises, set to head into a contract year, it doesn't surprise me that things would be a little uncomfortable.
I'm trying to build a case where you would trade CeeDee Lamb for some type of Herschel Walker type package, but the problem is you have to pay Lamb big time. I don't know if any team, Indianapolis Colts, I don't know who has the quarterback on the rookie deal that would take that roll of the dice. So then it's like, well, if you can't trade Lamb, do you trade Parsons? And by the way, I looked up Parsons' playoff stats. He hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
He's in total non-factor in playoff games, dominates the regular season. Is there a world where they explore trading one of those two, Parsons or Lamb?
Well, I don't think that they're going to sit there and make phone calls, but like what could happen is if either of these situations get ugly when we get to training camp, what inevitably winds up happening is phone calls get made, and incoming phone calls for the Cowboys, right? Like, so they don't need to shop CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons. They can sit there and wait for calls to get in if those situations get ugly. And, obviously both those guys play premium positions. CeeDee Lamb plays a position that now has the highest paid non-quarterback. Again, that's Justin Jefferson. And Micah Parsons plays a position that has the guy who was in that seat until just about a month ago, and that's Nick Bosa. So both those guys are expected to get contracts over $35 million a year. And, if the Cowboys aren't willing to go there now and they rattle cages, what's going to end up happening is teams are going to start to sniff around and see if there's some availability there. So, I think if these things aren't settled by the time we get to the first week, second week of August, if one or two of one of those guys or the other one doesn't wind up coming to training camp, well, naturally the phone calls start coming in. And then if you're the Cowboys, without even shopping the guys, you've got some things to consider. So certainly an unusual situation, having that many guys in contract situations. Of course, Micah Parsons isn't in a contract year, but Dak and CDR. And it's, a lot of noise for, coach and his staff to be dealing with going into the year, especially, when you've got, a pretty big shift on one side of the ball with Mike Zimmer coming in to lead the defense with Dan Quinn off to Washington.
Yeah, that's a big point. I forgot about that. Yeah. Let me go to Tua real quick. As a Jets guy, I have the Jets as the class in the AFC East, assuming Rodgers, is off the ayahuasca and he's got his act together and healthy.
And he's back.
I do have a question, though, about Tua. Like, I thought all along the Dolphins would draft a quarterback so they could have some leverage against having to pay Tua. They didn't draft a quarterback. I just don't understand what's taking so long here. Albert, I would just say, hey, Tua, we'll pay you $1 million more than Kyler Murray got. Take it or leave it. But then you can't do that because you have no other options. And now Tyreek Hill's like, hey, all the wide receivers are getting paid. Hook me up.
Yeah.
It just feels like a bit of a disaster in Miami.
Well, so I think one thing you got to understand about the way these contracts work, not all $55 million per year deals are created equal, right? Like, for example, like Joe Burrow is getting $146 million over the first 3 years of his contract. Trevor Lawrence is getting $114 million. That's a $32 million cap in what they're going to be making over the first 3 years. Yet both deals are sort of set up for those guys to make $55 million per year. So there are ways to play around with the big number that everybody pays attention to make it work for a team that might be willing to go there with their guy, but not to the extent that the Bengals did with Burrow, who's been to a Super Bowl. I think the bigger problem is the guarantees. And I think it's very easy to see this from both sides. If you look at it, J-Mac, right? Like if you're the Dolphins and you look at all the injury issues that Tua's had over the course of his career, would you feel comfortable guaranteeing money in 2026? Would you feel comfortable guaranteeing money in 2027? On the flip side, if you're Tua and you just went through an extra year where you were eligible for a contract and didn't get one, and you were coming off the concussion thing, and your college career ended with a serious hip injury, and you've had all of these injury problems over the course of your career, wouldn't that be the most important thing to you, right? Wouldn't it be the most important thing that guarantees go into 2026 and go into 2027? And so I think this is less about the big number. I think this is more about the details, and it's more about how much money is guaranteed and how much money is guaranteed out into future years, into year 3, into year 4, into year 5. And the one thing that Burrow and Lawrence, despite their contracts being different, have in common is that they've got guarantees that go out into year 4 and year 5. And when you're talking about a player that's got the injury history that Tua does, it's a little harder for a team to do it. And if you're that player, it's a little more difficult to accept anything that doesn't have those sorts of things in it.
Tough spot for Tua. He seems like a nice guy. I'm kind of rooting for him here. I want to pivot to, I know you're an Ohio State guy, so I got to needle you here. Jim Harbaugh goes to the Chargers. All signs point